Hello, everyone, and welcome to Hit and Hustle from IrishSportsDaily.com. I'm your host, Greg Flammang, and with me, as always, is Jamie Uyeyama, Mr. Jamie University. It is Thursday, June 10th, and just bear with me, everybody. As you see, I'm not in my regular setup here. I'm on vacation. I'm outside. I am making it happen for the people. We had to have a show because there's a lot going on right now with Notre Dame football. There was an injury to Charles Jagusah for the second consecutive offseason. He has broken his arm, his humerus bone. So we're going to talk about that, some things that we've heard on his recovery and what goes all into that. Jamie's going to talk about some possible options, right? I'm joking about it, but I'm not going to make Jamie predict what the offensive line makeup is going to be in 2025. But we are going to talk about what's possible, who could fill in that role. We'll talk about the recruiting. That show rolls on, right? Notre Dame got their the wide receiver commitments from Kadon Finley, Devin Fitzgerald, and Brayden Robinson. They've got an announcement coming up tomorrow from Nick Reddish. And then, of course, we've got Elijah Golden coming up on the 26th. So lots to discuss with Notre Dame football. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. If you like what you hear, please hit that like. Please hit subscribe. Please hit the notification bell so whenever it is, we are going live. Links to the podcast, as always, are in the description below. And as always, the show is brought to you by ESQ Clothing, founded by Notre Dame alum Ge Wang. You've seen ESQ and all your favorite Notre Dame players and coaches. With over a decade of making the best custom clothing available, ESQ will help you look and feel your best in 2025. From a perfect fitting suit or sport coat, shirt or bomber jacket, or the perfect tuxedo for wedding season, check out Ge's amazing work at esqclothing.com. Book an appointment to upgrade your wardrobe today. Mention ISD. You get 10% off your entire purchase. That's esqclothing.com. Jamie, not the news we wanted. Coming out of 4th of July, everyone was excited about the wide receivers and their commitments. And then we get the news that Charles Jagusah has broken his arm. He's broken his arm in a UTV accident. First initial thoughts on it. I mean, obviously, there's been a lot of discussion about whether or not players should be doing this or whether should they not be doing this. I think that's people have had their comments on that, and we don't really need to get into it. But it's a pretty big blow, right? And I know we went through a season where, there were a lot of injuries on the offensive line. Maybe let's just start off with what you think this could mean for Charles Jagusah in a vacuum himself. Right, having to come back, and then we can kind of go into what we've heard on the timeline and things like that. You talk to your wife about this, who is an expert in the field. Just where does it kind of? Where do you think that? How do you think this affects Charles Jagusah, the player?
I mean, it's obviously bad for him as a player. Like, I think that what people don't realize is, like, everybody thinks specifically because he came in last year. And how he came in and filled in during that time, right? And you're like, whoa, he played well after not playing the whole year, right? Against Penn State. And then he played pretty well against Ohio State too. And you're thinking, oh, wow, this guy is a pretty good player, right? But, I mean, I don't care who it is. It doesn't matter if it was Quentin Nelson or, Ronnie Stanley or Zach Martin or whatever. If you go through most of 2 full years without practicing, like, very much at all, you're not going to be anywhere close to as good as you should be. As you could be. You are not going to be anywhere close to the player not having played those game reps, right? And I think too, like, I always we watched him in the spring, and one of the things about the spring is that I think people kind of assume, like, oh man, because he was one of the only guys who was the reason why that he didn't have any time off in the spring, and all these other offensive linemen did. It was like, this guy didn't play during the season, so he was practicing, with everybody else, but he was getting walked back by Jason Hanye a few times in one-on-ones and in team, and he wasn't a dominant player at the the full practice that we went to for like the jersey scrimmage kind of time. And I think that was kind of an indication. I know it's one day, but it's an indication of like, he's not someone who's going to come out and walk out and be dominant right away. He needs time to build up to get to the player where he's going to be an All-American, a first-round pick or whatever. And now, because he's missed so much time and there's such very little film on him, I don't think he was someone. I know some people thought, oh, he's going to have the kind of year where he would go right to the NFL right away. And there's just no way that'll happen now, because even if he comes back and let's say he plays like, over half the year, he's still got like 9 starts or whatever it'll be, right? Like that's not a lot of film to go off of. And he's going to be nowhere close to a finished product. And obviously, offensive line, it's a meticulous position. Obviously strength and stuff matters. So it's not something where he can just walk in, like, you got a broken arm. As soon as it healed, he can't just come back and start playing. Like, he's got to build up that strength. So that time missed, also the continuity working with these people, his teammates in that role, it's going to cost him. Like, it's going to definitely be costly for him. And that's not even taking account if there is any kind of like penalties with the NIL. And we haven't heard anything like that, but I mean, certainly it's within reason that could happen based on him getting injured off the field. And I know that there are some schools that have that written into contracts and all that kind of stuff too. So we'll see what happens there. But just to talk about like future earnings, he's going to have, even if he goes and plays this year and plays well, he's still got to have, like, hopefully he's healthy the next year and has like a whole full season of there, because he's not going to have that much film to put out there, and he's not going to have that many reps to get better. And it's just very difficult to be that. I think like Eli Reardon is a perfect example of him missing so much time over his first couple years because of his ACL injuries. And that's why he's been behind. And that's why it's taking him until year 4 until he's going to have his breakout, when he was a guy who played as a freshman. And then maybe he would have been a guy, maybe he would have taken Mitchell Evans' job before that happened if he could have been healthy the whole way. Obviously, that's just a hypothetical. We don't know. But I'm just saying you will never know, because he missed all that time, and that it's costly. It's absolutely costly for Jagusah as an individual.
There's so many layers to the whole situation. Like, first of all, thank goodness it wasn't worse than this, honestly. Like, there's been so many like negative, tragedies that have gone on with accidents, right? I mean, just over the same time period, there was a footballer in Spain who got in a car accident and lost his life. He was actually headed to training camp, as it was, got into a car accident, his tire blew out, and something happened to him, right? And so like this situation could have been worse, right? It's a broken arm, and obviously that's bad. It could have been a much worse type of outcome. So thank goodness for that, right? And like, he's broken his arm. Thank goodness that he had access to a very good doctor where he was in Wyoming, right? So that was fortuitous on his part. Jamie, and it kind of, I alluded to it before, the conversation about whether or not he should have been doing this or whatever. There is a certain amount of accountability on a football team. And this, and I know this. Anyone who's ever played organized football kind of knows, like, coaches it's a very bottom line type of sport. And like, bottom line is, this can't happen. It just cannot happen on July 4th when you have camp that opens in 3 weeks or 2 weeks or whatever it is. There's all these sorts of trains of thought about, college kids will be college kids and all this other stuff. On a football team, it cannot happen. And so I think that it kind of blends into the conversation of his career, because I think last year when you hurt your pec and it's in practice, right? No one's going to get mad about that. There's nothing anyone's going to say. It's unfortunate. When it happens on a recreation time, when you're kind of making decisions for yourself, it kind of affects the way that you can come back then, because, you know, let's say whoever his replacement is, they come back and they're playing well. They're going to play against Miami and Texas A&M. If Notre Dame wins those games and that person plays well, you can't just come in and be like, all right, I'm ready to go. Like, well, now you've made a decision where you took yourself kind of out of the lineup a little bit. It's a little bit difficult then it's certainly a lot more difficult from a team standpoint to have someone come in. I don't want to say it is, because I don't know their coaches or their specific situation, but it could be, right? And so you can see a case where it's like, if Sullivan Absher's doing really well, this might be his spot. And so there's so many types of layers to this. Like you said, the NIL thing, you know, you're kind of putting your body in jeopardy, and Notre Dame is now paying for your participation, right? Like, the point is they're paying you money to play. So it's a whole different type of situation. And, you know, Raymond Horton says he was there with 11 other players. I get it, man. I understand. They all made poor decisions. Like, none of them should be there. Like,
how do you think those guys feel right now?
Yeah. Like,
they're not feeling great.
Yeah, they all made poor decisions to be in.
They're all feeling pretty stupid that, you know, Jagusah got hurt in the way that he did. Yeah. They're probably feeling lucky that it wasn't them, but it's just the reality of it. Doesn't matter what it is. Like somebody said, compared it to skiing or whatever. It's like, well, a guy can go skiing. It's like, remember Drew White talked about how when he got, you know, he went out and was doing, I can't remember what he was doing, but he was doing something that wasn't during spring break.
He was snowboarding.
I think he was snowboarding, separated his shoulder. And I mean, the coaches were not happy, obviously. And that's why it's one of those things where you just know it doesn't even matter what it is. It's just like, you know, that, if it doesn't even matter whose fault it was or that it happened to him or whatever. It just matters that he's not going to be there.
Yeah.
And that everybody else, it's like there's a trickle down effect of it. There's a trickle down effect of, like, obviously the coaches aren't going to be happy with all of those guys. Yeah. Like
they are all on
the list now. Right now. The list.
They're all going to get run. You know, they're going to run. Like, they are going to be punished for this. Like, that is going to happen. Every coach says you go on 4th of July, specifically 4th of July. Don't get yourself in trouble. Don't do anything to get yourself hurt. That is literally every coach in the world says this.
Yeah,
and when they did an activity that got someone hurt.
I mean, and actually, it doesn't even matter that it happened that way, but it's just one of these things where, because he's missing this time, and I don't care that they were with law enforcement. First of all, he wasn't with law enforcement when he got hurt. It was earlier in the day. I know all the details. We know all the details. So you don't want to argue any of the logistics with us. It's not even about that. It's about that he's going to miss time. So guess what? Now Sullivan Absher, hey, and he is, we can transition to that. It's a perfect opportunity for him to step in. And guess what? He was there too. And he probably feels guilty that this is how he gets his shot to be starter, but he's going to have to go out and prove it. And
yeah,
if he's playing good and they're playing well, he's not going to want to come out of the lineup. Right. And none of those guys will. And I think I wouldn't compare. Obviously, Jagusah is not the same as Zeke Correll. He's a more talented player, has a higher ceiling than Zeke Correll. But I talked about this, and I wrote about it in Six Thoughts. I talked about it with our friend Chris Wilson on his pod, that, you know, Zeke Correll gets hurt against Clemson. Then Andrew Kristofic comes in. He gets hurt. All of a sudden, they go to Ashton Craig. Ashton Craig plays really well in that situation, by the end of the regular season, well, Zeke Corral, that was it for him at Notre Dame, because they were like, yeah, we're going to roll with Ashton going forward.
Yeah.
And that was that for it, right? And so you can get Wally pipped, right? Like that can happen to somebody, and it doesn't have to be. And then sometimes too, that's how you find the next guy, and that's why I don't think I'm not someone who thinks that this is like, man, this is gonna really, like, they're gonna drop a game because of this. There's just gonna be whatever. It's not. We have no idea what's going to happen with that. And also the fact that this didn't happen, this is obviously a much better thing than it happened in the first series of the Miami game, right? It's a much better
even
thing.
like 2 weeks into camp. They have time to plan for what they want to do.
Because actually the best thing that happened with the only good thing that happened with Jagusah tearing his pec last year was that it happened on the first weekend of camp. So they had time to go, okay, Tosh Baker, it's your spot now. And then I'm like, well, it's not going to be his spot. And then Knapp took that spot, right? And so now they're going to have time to figure out exactly who is going to be there. And that's how you get the next Ashton Craig. That's how they got Joe Alt. There was no intention. Joe Alt was going to redshirt most likely if they didn't, because they already had, like, Blake Fisher was supposed to be the left tackle that year.
Yeah.
And obviously Blake Fisher still started the next years and whatever, but he lost that left tackle spot from there. So he got beat out. And then because, Carmody and Baker weren't ready, Joe Alt took that spot, and then he became Joe Alt, right? And he played well right away, and then all of a sudden he was on his way to becoming a top 5 pick. And I think this is why, if you're Notre Dame, you recruit well, you develop well. Traditionally over the years, that's been the thing at offensive line, and you have a coach you obviously trust to develop guys and get guys ready there. And you just went through a whole season where it was next man in, and the next man in played pretty well in each case. This isn't a situation like it was even in that 2021 year. That was like a much worse, scenario in terms of like depth and what they had there at the position. They didn't have like great options. Obviously, Kristofic came in and, they moved him into the starting lineup. I mean, he never started after that year. That wasn't like he wasn't like that guy, but he still played decent, at that time. Notre Dame's going to have somebody come in and play there and be better than decent. And that might be Sullivan Absher. Maybe it's Joe Otting. Maybe it's, Chris Terrick, who isn't really a guy who's on the radar of anyone right now. He missed the spring because of his shoulder thing. Well, guess what? Now, all of a sudden, he could go from a guy who never plays to, it's like, this is your chance, man. This is your chance to really develop into something. Could be a freshman. Could be someone like that. It could be anybody. Could be Gerby Lambert, right?
Yeah.
Move into guard, right?
The shot in the butt that this will give to so many people. There's an open O-line spot on Notre Dame's offensive line, and it's like, okay, like that like you said, everyone is going to like Sullivan Absher, obviously, Joe Otting, obviously, Chris Terrick, obviously, right? Like you said, Will Black, possibly, Gerby Lambert, possibly, right? Like this is when everyone kind of like, oh, okay, like it's unfortunate for Jagusah, right? And they feel bad for their friend, but they're there and ready to compete, right? So, like, for us to speculate on who or what, we have no idea. This could play out so many different kinds of ways, which is a good thing for Notre Dame because they do have a bunch of options. I do want to point out, because the Jacob Paulus brings up the offensive line played pretty well without Jagusah last year, which is true. This year is different because you had the Riley Leonard factor last year, where he was so good at, if the offensive line had a bust or someone blew an assignment or whatever it might be, he was able to escape pressure, save the play, and get Notre Dame moving. And then, so then kind of save the offensive line at times. You may not have that this year, right? Like that is part of the unknown. So I think that's why this year it's a little bit more concerning. Actually, I would say it's probably a great bit more concerning losing one of your best offensive linemen because you don't have that experience. Oh, we have a quarterback that can really save us and get us out of trouble. You don't have that this year. So it's going to be a bit more contentious to me. Like, I'm not ready to simply say, hey, they figured it out last year. They'll definitely figure it out this year. I think they'll probably figure it out in some way, but the way that it gets figured out is going to be different. And I think the growing pains might be a little bit different than they were last year because of the quarterback situation. Wanted to get your thoughts on that as well.
I mean, it is different because of the, they don't have the guys who have played, there before. And those guys would have been like insurance policies. But I think even last year when those guys came in, there was a lot of questions about, well, now they're coming in. It's like, aren't these the guys who couldn't win the job? Like,
yeah,
that was the story. It was like, Coogan and Spindler, yeah, they might have started last year. They couldn't win a starting job this year. That was the thing with them. They got beat out in camp by other guys. So they came in and played well and did a pretty good job. But that wasn't like the thought process was like, well, they're fine because of those guys. Because really the truth is both of them struggled the year before. They had struggled. So I think there was certainly a little bit of unknown there. I think one thing with there's the new quarterback part of it is always going to be different, and that's going to add to it because Leonard was so good at like escaping and avoiding the negative plays, and there's always going to be that piece of it, and that is really like unknown about those guys. But I think one of the things is that they are going to play two pretty good defensive lines to start the season, and like Ruben Bain, I think is a guy who's projected to be a first round pick. They're going to have some they'll face some dudes. I wouldn't say it's the exact same thing as facing that Texas A&M defensive line in week 1
for sure
compared to last year, and just who they had there. And also, like, I think that Notre Dame, even without the kind of having those kind of insurance guys in Coogan and Spindler, I still think they're just in a much better spot than they were last year, just in terms of all those guys working together, because Emil Wagner and Knapp specifically are like much better than they were getting into the week 1. Frouth is a better player now than he was then. Craig will be a better player than he was then. Like, so, there's that spot there. That's going to be, a question mark and how that player will do. But I just think overall the line is still going to be stronger. I mean, if they get another injury or whatever, hey, then it becomes another topic later on. But I just think that there's still so many other things there. Just even with like the backs and pass protection, everybody's more experienced. So much was new last year. Or even like they didn't trust Greathouse the same way.
Well, and the tight end, is it because remember Mitchell Evans was also coming off injury too, so that was like a big question mark. So like the tight end situation is more sorted out than it was a year ago, right? So that's a big part of it. I mean, think about like Emil Wagner was a complete unknown at this time last year. No clue, right? Obviously Anthony Knapp, right? Like Notre Dame doesn't. So like across the line, whoever comes in is more likely just more experienced than Anthony Knapp was, obviously, going against Texas A&M. Like you said, that front is not like the Miami front's going to be good, not as good as the A&M front. So there's mitigating parts of it, right? The quarterback situation isn't as sorted, but also the O-line situation is much stronger than it was, you know, trying to recover from this a year ago than they are, they are now, right? So that they're in a much better position, just for whoever comes in. If Sullivan Absher is his third year in the program, right? So he's been around for a long time.
Yeah, and I also think too that, as Chris Wawerka mentioned too, like they should be able to rely on the running game a lot more than they have, especially early, because they ran the ball. They ran the ball at the end of that Texas A&M game. They got explosive plays, certainly from Price and Love in that game. And then, they had obviously the Purdue game where they're just running through them like a hot knife through butter. But like, they were not, that was a process they were so much better in like the last third of the year than they were running the football. And I think that's another part of it too, where if you were going to say what's like the best thing to kind of like, protect that quarterback, it's that they're probably going to be able to run the ball even better than they did last year.
Yeah. And it won't have to rely on Leonard's legs as much last year because of, just like they know what they have these backs now, right? Like, again, Price was a little bit more known than Love, but Love wasn't really very well known at this time, right? Like, people didn't know exactly what they had in Jeremiah Love, and now he might.
No one thought he was going to be the best back in college football, people had high hopes that he was going to be great, right? Yeah, or like whatever, like of that, no one thought that like, man, he'll have the kind of year where, maybe the only back you trade him for would be Ashton Jonty. Like that's like the guy who went as a top 10 pick, like. I even the most homer Notre Dame fan wouldn't have said that, Jeremiah Love is going to be that year. They would say maybe this year. And now it's like, well, the sky's the limit now, right? Or even that Price was going to be as good as he was, right? That wasn't people thought, hey, they're pretty good in the backfield. They exceeded expectations.
Yeah. Just to kind of put a bow on this conversation, for as far as Jagusah specifically, regardless of all the other variables involved, we're hearing middle September back to activity, probably not ready to go till like probably October. When's Notre Dame's first bye? I don't have the schedule like totally memorized at this point.
Oh, their first bye is after.
Well, I mean, after the A&M game, because like that. So that's I mean. Is there one in October like there was last year? Because I know
it's after USC.
After USC, okay, that's probably a little bit later than I was thinking. So, like, my point is like he's not going to be ready for the two biggest games against Miami and A&M. I think after that, I would think probably October. So the good news for him is that he is going to have a say. It's possible. It's possible that he does have a say in, how this season plays out, right? And this is, taken into account, like how well everyone's playing, what's the health of everybody at this point. The good news for him is that he has the type of skill set that, let's say something were to happen to, Knapp or Wagner or any of the other guards, like because of his skill set and what he's able to do, he's able to play basically all four positions aside from center, so that if something were to happen to somebody, he could obviously come in and fill in, and he would be very good. We've seen it, right? So so that's a good part of this. It's not a season-long thing, projected right now. Look, anytime you've got a plate in your arm, anytime you've had surgery, there are complications that can come with that. There are setbacks that can come with that, right? So, but the early word is we're looking at back to activity, kind of early September, mid-September, and hopefully ready to play soon after that, whether it would be late September, middle of October. So, it's not a great situation for him personally. You kind of, when we discuss this, we try to weigh both things, what it's like for the player. Obviously, you don't want anyone to get hurt like this. And it's unfortunate. And look, when we speak critically of the decision, we don't have any ill will towards him or anything like that. We're just trying to speak into our knowledge of what it means to be on a football team and how these things are usually handled, right? Like people are asking me, who do you think he called first? Like, do you think he called Rudolph first? Do you think he called Marcus Freeman? It's like, I don't think he talked to either of them, right? Because they don't want to hear, he doesn't want to talk to them, right? Because he's going to get in big trouble, right? So he,
also, he wasn't the one who called. It was somebody else.
Yeah,
It was
yeah.
somebody else who called for him. And
probably because he had to go into surgery, right? So
yeah, for sure.
There's a lot going on there. Look, so we hope for the best for him. We hope that he gets back very soon. We're just trying to add insight into how this usually works on a football team. It's no one likes having this conversation, right? No one likes talking about a player who's been injured over the break. And it is him and a bunch of friends just trying to have a good time. Obviously, in our opinion, this is a poor decision. We're not trying to crucify his character or anything like that. It's just, he's not the first college athlete who ever made a poor decision over 4th of July. You can make a good decision for yourself and your media company by going with VSR, though, Jamie. You could do that. Of course, founded by Notre Dame Football pregame host and Emmy Award-winning anchor Vahid Sabrizadeh, VSR Media provides professional and cinematic video and photo. Whether you're looking for a collegiate or pro-level highlight reel, have a personal story to tell, or are aiming to diversify and grow your business, VSR Media specializes in short and long-form video storytelling, social media management, website design. VSR Media also captures professional headshots, senior and sports photos. Contact them at vsrmediacompany.com. Mention Irish Sports Daily to receive 20% off your first project. Visit them online or give them a call at 574-800-9106. All right. Some decisions have been made. Speaking of decisions, Notre Dame's wide receiving core has for their recruiting class in 2026 has crystallized, Jamie. We're looking at, in order, Dylan Faison, Bubba Frazier, Kadon Finley, Devin Fitzgerald, Brayden Robinson. That's going to be the 5-man class, hopefully, if no one defects from the class. That's going to be their 5-man class for 2026. Kadon Finley, 4th of July. Pretty big for Notre Dame. What's kind of your assessment of that?
Yeah, it's huge, right? And obviously that's the guy that we had circled as, I would say, the most important recruit for them on offense for the longest time now, right? And he's the top receiver on the board. He was the guy who probably can help them the earliest out of all of them. I think he has the highest floor he definitely has the highest floor out of any of the guys that they're recruiting. And then, he's one of those players who probably has one of the highest floors out of any receiver in the class, right? Maybe his ceiling isn't as high as some of like the 5-star kids, but his floor is just as high as any of them, right? And very similar to Jaden Greathouse in that way too, just in terms of like size, just polish and things that he's good at. And if anything, I would say he's probably got a little bit more juice in terms of just straight speed. I think he's faster than Greathouse was.
Jamie, let me throw this at you. When I did my solo show on last Thursday, I was talking about Finley. I said I compared him to Greathouse in that way. I said the exact same thing. I said, he had a little bit more juice, especially after with the ball in his hands, right? I don't remember Greathouse getting jet sweeps and taking it to the house and things of that nature. I did think Greathouse was a little bit better of a route runner, just more polished in that way.
Yeah.
That was kind of how I saw it.
Yeah, that's what I would say. I think, and I will say that I had Greathouse. I gave him a higher rating than I had Finley now. That's not to say that he won't, by the end of the process, he won't have the same, because I gave Greathouse, he was a 93 for me. And, Finley is a 92. But I think that it's they're very close. They're just, there's enough similarities there that you could see where for both of them, I think could play any of the 3 wide receiver spots. I think that is something that they could do. And I think that Finley is probably, he could play the boundary. I think it's probably his best position will be the field, but he's also a guy I think could play the slot and be a big slot like that too. So I think that but he approaches it in the exact same way that Greathouse does in terms of like he's a pro, or like he has a pro mentality while he's still a high school football player, right? And he's going to come in with that same mentality. A lot of that has to do with his dad being an NFL player. Like that's certainly something of it too. But he goes and he works with Margin Hooks, who's a very reputable wide receiver trainer, one of the best in Texas, probably maybe the best in Texas, one of the best in the country, known for that. And obviously Devin Fitzgerald is the guy working with him too. And I think it's just one of those things where when someone is dedicated to the craft like that, and they already have like the physical ability, it's very rare that guy doesn't end up hitting and being to me, just like Greathouse, where it's like, could be a wide receiver 1, probably at the very least, he's a wide receiver 2 and a guy who helps your team.
Yeah, I kind of said the same thing. Like you got to land him because Texas really wants him, and they're a big wide receiver school. And so it's like, it's important recruitment to win, just period. Like I think for Mike Brown, right? Like from a narrative standpoint. And I honestly, to be honest with you, Jamie, I bet you it's big for Mike Brown, just like within the coaching staff. Because he's new. He's one of the newer ones. And like when you go head to head against Texas and win, that you walk a little bit taller into the football offices. You know what I mean? Like it feels good for him to kind of get that off the mark, And so I think that's important for him, just regardless of, what it means to the actual football team. And like you said, like he's just Finn's is good football player. Like he's just really good at a number of things. He can play any of the positions, in my opinion. So that's why we were always kind of like, you got to land him. The next day they land Devin Fitzgerald. As Devin Fitzgerald says, he's Larry Fitzgerald's son. He said that in the announcement. I'm curious to get what you think his ceiling is. I know a lot of people look at him as kind of like a high floor guy because of his dad, and he's got that kind of skill set of he's a solid possession receiver kind of guy, kind of like Elijah Burris in that way. I'm curious what you think Devin Fitzgerald's ceiling is as a football player, though.
I think a lot like Burris. I think he's underrated, right? Like I think he's underrated and is going to get better. And kind of similar to Burris too. And I also said like kind of similar to Bryce Young. He's a guy who's gone through a lot of like physical development late. And I don't know, maybe it's just like something in common with some of these guys who have, elite athlete fathers or whatever.
Yeah.
But he's someone who's grown physically, like, just height, weight, like a lot in the last couple of years. And that has been something I think has been notable, because I think even when I've watched some of his 7-on-7 stuff, since his junior season, and obviously he had a breakout junior season. I think he's going to have a monster senior year, because if you watch him with 7-on-7 stuff, like he's physically a different guy than he was. He's like 15 pounds heavier than he was. And in a good way, where you can tell he's like bigger, stronger, faster. And that's something that I think, with some guys just max out early. Some guys just hit that peak a little bit earlier in terms of that. And I think with him, he's still like, just scratching the surface of what he's going to be in that way. So I think there's a lot of room for him to like grow as a player because of that. And because of this kind of thing, if you're watching this clip right now of like, he has a lot of things like that where you're like, this guy just wants it. There's a want to with him after the catch that I just love to see. Like he's fighting for yards, right? And and we talked about when we highlighted him the other week too about what he did on that one where he took that slant, for a long one. But like, I think just similar to his dad, was not a burner in terms of the 40, but his dad sure looked pretty fast, on the football field too. Like there's something about like the competitive speed, and he's got plenty of competitive speed.
You know what I like about him is he catches, and Kadon Finley had one of these, like his first clip is when he runs a little like kind of in route and catches the ball and takes it to the house after the catch. on a couple of those, Devin Fitzgerald has catches where he catches the ball from a stopped position and ends up turning it into a big play. That's hard to do, right? Like you won't see, like that's not the sort of thing you see from like Bubba Frazier. Like everything's kind of on the run, right? Same thing with Dylan Faison. Like and obviously, right? Like Bubba Frazier is very fast, right? They're gonna throw him a lot of deep balls, you know. But for Devin Fitzgerald specifically, like it's important to him because it's like that sort of thing and that sort of feel for how to maneuver with your back to the defense, right? Where you turn and maneuver around and you can get upfield. That sort of thing is kind of innate. It's hard to teach. If you don't have it, then it's just one of those things. There's not a lot of great drills for that sort of thing. You just need to be able to play with your back to the defense like that. And he has that ability. Like you said, as he gets stronger, as he gets bigger, if he becomes physically more impressive from a speed, agility standpoint, well, then the evaluation kind of changes, right? Because of the way that he can play, right? Like the technique stuff is not going anywhere. If we're just talking about like, oh, he wasn't physically impressive and now he is, you're talking about a different prospect altogether. And that's what kind of makes me excited. Another thing I said on that show was like, I don't see where it doesn't work out with Fitzgerald. Kind of in the same way as Finley. I just don't see where it doesn't work out. What will he not be good at, right? Like what's a fatal flaw that he has? I don't know that he has one. Especially because he's gotten bigger and faster and stronger, you know?
Yeah.
So that's where it's kind of like you want guys like that in the class. And of course, like, I don't know, man. Sometimes I don't want to lean into the pedigree. I can't help but lean into the pedigree with Devin Fitzgerald. It's just like his dad's a Hall of Famer, man. He's one of the best ever. Like,
Yeah.
It's just I don't want to not talk about it. I just think it's relevant.
Well, and Tom Haberstroh, you know, he's a basketball writer, and he's always done a lot of great stuff over the years. And you know, he did this one big piece for Yahoo. I can't remember if it was last year, 2 years ago, but talking about the most undervalued players in the NBA draft year after year, the guys who get underdrafted, and it's guys whose dads played in the NBA. They're always drafted lower than they should be, and not always, but the majority of the time they're drafted under where they should be, and they outperform where, you know, they were drafted according to their slot. And it doesn't mean all those guys become Hall of Famers, but a lot of them just end up you know, being good or a lot better than you think, because maybe it's just as simple as like understanding like how to, you know, be professional about certain things, how to treat certain things. Their you know, their dad being like, nah, don't do that. Like, you know, do this instead or whatever. Like Joe Alt is a perfect example of that, right? He was completely unreal. Bryce Young, another guy, right? Also, both of them, by the way, huge physical transformations while late in high school and early on in university. That is something, right? And just in case, except Bronny, I'll tell you what, with Bronny, he's a second round pick, right? He's never going to be his dad. He might be an NBA rotation player. And if you are like a late second round pick and you become a rotation player, and that you way outperformed where you are, right? So it's not to say that Devin Fitzgerald is going to be as good as his dad. Like that's not what it's about. But if you look at like where guys are rated, I think you could even say like Kennedy Urlacher. Obviously, he's at USC now, but I don't know what he's going to be for sure in college football. But I already know just by watching him in practice and then, you know, his little glimpse of the thing, he's much better than where he was ranked. And that's just a fact.
Yeah. The third commitment to or the third wide receiver of the weekend to announce for Notre Dame, Brayden Robinson. And there's been some kind of like debate about how fast he is or whatever. I do think it's kind of weird. I talked about it in the ISD chat. Like, it is weird to me. You've run so fast as a young person. Why didn't you continue? To me, if a fast person continues to run races, like, it's weird that he didn't, or he hasn't taken it super seriously since then. So therefore, he hasn't had times to kind of back that up. Obviously, he plays fast, right? Like, you watch him play, and this is not a slow player, right?
Oh yeah.
Like, so I'm not really concerned about that. To me, you'll know, because here's the other part. You know who was a pretty good football player for Notre Dame and like had a pretty good career in a lot of facets? Joey Getherall. And you can't tell me that Brayden Robinson is not the same size as him. Joey Getherall had a good career for Notre Dame.
Oh yeah. He's probably bigger than him.
Yeah. So to me, if Joey Getherall can play at Notre Dame, I know it's a different era. Frankly, it was a different era that benefits. It's a different era that benefits Robinson more than it did Getherall at the time. I think if Joey Getherall can play at Notre Dame, then Brayden Robinson can play at Notre Dame. I like that Notre Dame took him right as the fifth wide receiver. I think Mike has been pretty clear. Like, this kid can, like, that's an example of a player who caught the ball with his back to the defense and turns it into what it is. Like, he has good wide receiver traits that you usually don't see from a smaller, just speed guy. So I love that they took him. I know that there was a lot of discussion about whether or not they should or not. I'm very glad that they did. This is exactly the type of player I think you should be taking a flyer
on. I certainly don't think they absolutely needed him, but
right.
You take a guy like this, just like you would take another guy who was like a 6'4" boundary, because there aren't that many of them.
Yeah.
There aren't that many guys that can run like this. And yes, he is small. Maybe those limitations will mean that he isn't ever a player at Notre Dame. Maybe that's definitely a possibility. But I always look at it where, perfect example, CJ Sanders, very small, never became the kind of receiver that people thought he could be. And if you look at his testing numbers, like his spark score was just like insane. Like, he's a crazy athlete. Never became the receiver that he wanted. Who cares? Him taking, I think he took 4 kicks back to the house during his career at Notre Dame. Just taking one, it was worth the scholarship we're taking it. And he took back 4. So that's kind of the difference, really, where if Robinson becomes just this really great explosive returner, that is worth the scholarship, and that is value added to your team. And it's not like you don't want to take too many exceptions. You don't want to take too many small guys. Obviously, if you do that, you're going to be in a bad spot. But I mean, you've seen guys like Tutu Atwell. You've seen guys like Tez Johnson. Like, they're like 155 pounds. Those guys made a lot of plays. They have to be in the right system. They have to be used correctly. And for those guys to have success if they're part of the offense. Just like how I know with Joey Getherall, he was never a great receiver. His impact was more in the return game, but they schemed stuff up for him, to get him open and use his speed, and he made an impact that way. And that's what I kind of see for Brayden Robinson. I don't think it's likely, because of his size, that he's ever going to be, a guy who's just feasting the slot, getting 70 catches, getting 1,200 yards, receiving. I don't think that's likely. Can he be a guy who, averages 17 yards a catch in his small sample that he does, also in the return game? I think that's, something that he could easily be, with a chance to be something more.
Sign me up for that. I'm glad Notre Dame did it. Greg Wasserman says he doesn't love taking too many at a certain position, except in this case, Notre Dame needs numbers. 100%. I agree with that. And I love the flyer they took on him. And anytime you can bet on speed like that and versatility, especially when we just saw a similar stature player win you a game against Georgia in the Sugar Bowl, we're getting on that. Tomorrow, there's going to be an announcement from Nick Reddish, the defensive back. Notre Dame feels good about it. Our staff feels good about it. Mike Frank feels good about it. Loves him, what he brings to the class. I like him a lot because there's a utility aspect to him because I think he can play inside in the slot. And I think he can also play safety. And that's what I like about him. I think there's a versatility to him that exists within within everybody else. But I also think like his versatility, like Joey O'Brien is versatile, but he has a single position, right? He's probably going to be that high safety. Kari Adams is versatile. He's probably going to be that corner. I think Reddish has a utility aspect to him. He could play a lot of positions in the defense. I really like adding a player like this if they were able to secure his commitment. So, yeah, I think this would be good. This would round out their DB class as well. One of the best DB classes in recent memory for Notre Dame.
Yeah, and I love like that right there, like him just like running through a dude, right? Yeah. Like I think he plays aggressive. Physicality to him. There's a physicality to him. Obviously, he's got production, right? Because if you can't find the football in high school as a DB, very rarely are you going to find the football a lot, as a DB in college. Yeah, it's a skill, and so I think. He obviously missed his junior year because of injury. And that is a question, about where he's been. Because, I mean, obviously, there's a gap. Obviously, whenever you see someone who the sophomore film compared to junior film, that's always going to be a gap. So I do have some questions about that. And I want to see, like, what he looks like as a senior. And what his athleticism looks like. What kind of jump did he make, during this time? But I mean, KVA was another guy who missed time because he, a knee injury in high school, and I mean, he didn't look worse for wear, and he developed quite a bit physically like, during that time. Not for
nothing too, but like on the visits, the pictures he's taken, he looks good. He looks physically very good. He doesn't look like a guy who's been injured and has kind of gotten skinny or whatever. He looks physically impressive on that front as well.
Yeah, and he's someone that I think that if you were, I can only grade off of his sophomore film and what I see there, and I have him as like a high 3-star kid right now. He could easily be a 4-star kid before the time is up, and that's, it happens a lot with guys who miss that time, and I do think there is something to like Mike Micken's pretty good evaluator, and this is a guy that was. Early on, he was this isn't someone they went into late and they were like identified as like, okay, now he's back and whatever. No,
he's always been a part of the conversation. Yeah.
This was, I believe it was a pot of gold offer, right? Yeah. Like, so he was an early offer for Notre Dame.
I want to go back to a comment here. You made the comp on Brayden Robinson and Trey Tucker at Cincinnati.
Yeah.
What's the Trey Tucker trivia question on him, Jamie? Do you know what it might be? The
Trey Tucker trivia? No,
trivia
I don't
question.
know.
Yeah, he's an answer to a trivia question. Do you know what it might be?
No, I don't know it.
The only player to score a touchdown on Kyle Hamilton during his career at Notre Dame. Trey Tucker.
Well, I did know that he was the guy who beat on that corner route, beat him there. And I mean, that was that was really, the only time I can recall Kyle Hamilton ever getting beat deep.
Yeah.
And he got turned around by him.
Yeah.
And honestly, it was probably one of those things that helped Trey Tucker get drafted in the 3rd round, like that specific play. And obviously he made other plays like that too. Yeah. But the reason that I chose Trey Tucker for him was specifically because that's what the staff said. They were like showing him film of Trey Tucker, and this is who we think you could be, right? And
that's interesting.
Yeah, and that is interesting because Trey Tucker also was a guy that when as a freshman, he was 167 pounds. And then by the time he left, he's 185 pounds. I don't know if Robinson's ever going to be 185 pounds, but we'll see. We'll see how much bigger he gets. And there's obviously a lot of time there. You know, and obviously too, they still very high on Bubba Frazier and, you know, what his potential as well.
I love Bubba Frazier. I do. I like him a lot. I've heard some commentary that that Robinson is a better prospect than Bubba Frazier. I respectfully disagree with that. I think Bubba Frazier has a very, very high ceiling. To me, there's a lot of potential for a very, very good slot at Notre Dame, especially with some of the like the jet stuff that he does. Like he's able to get inside and he's comfortable with the ball in his hands. I'm very high on Bubba Frazier, so I'm excited about this wide receiver group. I mean, especially when you know they lost you know that Connor Solomon player, obviously Trent Mosley to USC. Like that was tough for them. They really wanted him. And so I think there was a time where it was like, who are they actually going to get? So I think where Notre Dame actually eventually ended up is in a very good place at wide receiver. There is a caliber of wide receiver that we've talked about before that they need to get to the kind of Joey O'Brien type of caliber of wide receiver, Kari Adams caliber of wide receiver that they need to be getting in on a little bit more frequently. But for this group, I'm excited about the group that they brought in. And I think it's going to be a good group. The last player is July 26th. That's a little bit far away for us to really go into it, Elijah Golden. So as it gets closer to that, we'll go into the Elijah Golden recruitment and what that could mean for Notre Dame's class. I think next week, Jamie, someone sent me a private message on ISD, wanted us to do a two class look. Because that's what I really think it becomes, you know, like everyone's so excited about this year and what, you know, the ranking could be, and everyone's doing the class calculator. And is it the best class? I think it could be from a 2-year class standpoint. That's where it really kind of separates, and you can see where Notre Dame is set up as a football program with the freshman and sophomore classes that are coming in, because it could be really special. So I think next week we could be doing that, because there's kind of not a lot going on. We're in between the recruiting period and the fall camp period. We can do a deep dive on that. So I think that can do it for today. Thank you everyone for tuning in. If you like what you hear, hit that like, hit subscribe, hit the notification bell. So whenever it is we are going live, I appreciate everyone kind of hanging in there. I don't know what my connection was like, but no one brought it up in the chat. So hopefully it was good enough. But we'll be back next week on Monday for Power Hour. Michael will be back on vacation, I think. Is he going to be back, Jamie? I think he's supposed to be back for.
It's TBD. TBD.
Touch and go right now.
Yeah.
But either way, we'll be back on Tuesday and Thursday. I will be at a different location, but I'll be in a hotel, so I'm pretty sure my internet will be good. My son's we got the regional championships, Jamie. They're up near Sacramento for the
let's go
All-Stars. You know, we're rocking it. He hit his first home run this last on the 5th. He hit his first home run. It's the way that 8-year-olds hit home runs. It was not one of those things where they threw the ball around and it was a bunch of errors. It wasn't that. He hit the ball. He went Oppo Taco on a 3-0 pitch and got past the outfielder, and he cleared the bases. It was a thrilling moment for everybody. So, but I'm going to be on the road, but still going to be doing shows, so it's going to be all good. So we'll talk to you then. Have a good weekend, everyone. We will talk to you soon. Keep hitting and hustling.